Hello, and welcome to Replay Value. Listen, I've been around the block a few times. I knew what I was getting into when I started Rental Girlfriend. I surprisingly looked forward to the online discussion that was sure to follow every episode, and unironically was excited for the first few chapters to be animated. But honestly, I feel like I'm going crazy here because no one's talking about the thing that's so obviously whacked about this series. No, not Mommy. She's actually the reason why the first few episodes work so well, and no, not about Kazuya either. Come on, y'all. Seriously. Am I really, genuinely, the only person who thinks, unequivocally, and becomes increasingly baffled in every following episode that the show cannot make up its mind whether it's brilliant or boneheaded when it comes to the soundtrack? Centimeter is a great song, and it matches its visuals and its storyline almost perfectly, and wouldn't you know it, so does the show sometimes, which makes the moments where it completely drops the ball so infuriating. Rental Girlfriend's production at its best is like Centimeter, and at its worst is like Mizuhara's opinion of Kazuya after episode 2, or the ED, personally not a fan of that style. Which is a convenient metaphor because not only do I have some issues with the overall style of the soundtrack, and we'll tackle that first, but I wanted to show some best and worst use cases of said score to show how it can not only provide incredible meaning, and then moments later muddy and confuse the tone to a degree where I'm convinced no one is at the wheel on the production. Basically, it's another classic replay video where I just talk about the sound design. Before we get into some of those specific moments of score usage, both good and bad, I want to get my bias out of the way really fast. I personally despise when soundtracks try to blend classical and electronic music into poppy nonsense. An example of this is actually one of the first things you'll hear upon starting the series. Less than a minute in and you can hear Chopin's Funeral March mixed with what sounds like The Messenger's sound font. There's a similar moment later on with one of Mozart's serenades, if it was designed for a hold call or elevator music at a trendy business. Normally, I'd wonder why there's so many remixes and a video game aesthetic to the music, but in this case, it's about what I'd expect from Hyadain, who I actually knew before this show exclusively from his video game remixes of stuff like Mario and Mega Man. If you haven't listened to Super Mario World Western Show, I'll leave a link in the description. He does all the voices and it's hilarious, though frankly that might be pure nostalgia talking at this point. And for those of you who have seen Nichijou, he also does that opening theme, which also has a video game current to its midsection. The main question I have is, why is there a video game aesthetic to this soundtrack at all? I get when a show like D-Frag has one, because it's about gaming, and hell, I love video game soundtracks, as anyone who's listened to my video's background music can attest to. But why is this show calling back to nostalgic game consoles when that has zero to do with its identity? It's a rom-com. Why is this music making me think of Street Fighter? I will say that it certainly makes a clear point of difference between itself and half a dozen other rom-coms like Bokuben or Quince, which all sound the same because they use the same instrumentation and style. I like that it's different, but there's a reason why everyone uses that style, and it's because it works for the genre, and I think that having Hyadain be the composer was a weird direction to go in. At its best moments, it pays off great. Mizuhara's theme totally works, for example. But at its worst, the electronic tunes clash with the traditional instrumentation, making it feel a bit like a patchwork OST. It's just weird to go from this and then follow that up literal seconds later with a piano track like this. And then you have classic leitmotifs mixed into trance beats, and my only thought is how goofy it sounds, and not in a good way like a fifth of Beethoven. But enough about the soundtrack style. It's something you're either going to like or dislike, and I really just need to get my Hyadain nostalgia and my biases off my chest. Let's get into the meat of why Rental Girlfriend's soundtrack has consumed my brain. I can't think of another show that's as Jekyll and Hyde as this one when it comes to score usage. For example, in the first episode on the second date, Kazuya is really negative about the whole thing, but the music leans much more on the positive side even if it's a bit slow tempo, kind of like Mizuhara has to be to keep up the rental facade even if she's not happy. The music stops though when Kazuya outs the pretend relationship. 恋人でもないでしょ。他人でしょ。That's some good contrast between the emotional state of our main character and the score, while also serving as a good match for Mizuhara's rental facade. It's nothing special, but this is what I would call my baseline expectation for how the music should be used. It matches the tone of the scene quite well. And to be clear, most of the scenes are like this, from Kazuya's grandmother talking about the beautiful dream she was shown, which has a pretty piano melody, to the awkward revelation that Mizuhara is also at the beach with a legitimately funny comedy tune to it, and us being shown people having fun at that same beach has a traditional youthful summer vibe. This is totally normal, but on occasion Rental Girlfriend really blows me away with something great. My favorite example of the score usage in this show is at the start of episode 3, where Kazuya is nervously explaining why he just asked Mommy to go back to his apartment with him. Normally, you'd expect dead silence to really hammer home the anxious energy or some atmospheric track that captures that same emotion. Other shows might go for a sad song to preview his tears that'll be coming up in a moment. Instead, Rental Girlfriend does the dopest thing and plays rock music that you'd hear after the hero delivers a victory speech and wins the day. On first listen, you might be like, what? Why is this the music we're listening to right now? It feels tonally inconsistent, especially when he's crying and thinking about how much he likes Mommy. But the music isn't for Kazuya. It's for Mommy. She's winning right now, she's still got his affection, and her manipulation is totally working. Internally, she's going, hell to the yes, I've got this! And I dig that the sound design reinforces her characterization in this scene. It's a reflection of power in the sequence. Kazuya is made so small in this moment that he doesn't even have control of the music. At least until he pushes back against her and a hopeful track begins to play, reasserting control of his relationships a bit. Genuinely, I think this moment is fantastic. It would have been so easy to choose a song that matched how pathetic Kazuya is at the start of this scene to make him someone for us to pity. But this victory music choice still enables that interpretation while making it clear that Mommy's actions are very intentional to achieve this outcome, if the last episode wasn't sufficient to do so. And speaking of the last episode, let's chat about a place where the music doesn't really live up. The argument between Mizuhara and Mommy starts out great. Mommy's dialogue is backed up by this track that sounds like Gearless Joe should be walking out to box. It's the audio indication of a fight in case you're not fully paying attention to the spoken word. Then it's Mizuhara's turn to rebut and, well... It's spacewalk music. I half expect Senku to turn up and start talking about the value of magnesium. And even if you disagree with that specific characterization, it's certainly not combat music. Mizuhara isn't diffusing the situation either, so it's weird for the tone to be so neutral. The track is not a variation on her theme, as best as I can tell either. I understand the desire to draw contrast between the two characters, but it feels like that could have been done via musical genre, like Joe and Yuri have in Megalo Box. Joe is the traditional rock, Yuri has electronic elements. I guess you could argue that it's foreshadowing for when Kazuya takes no sides and Mommy takes control by ordering him another drink. I just feel like it was a missed opportunity to build the ideological conflict that these characters represent regarding Kazuya and needing to stand up, if not for himself, at least for others, as better represented in the scene we just spoke about moments ago. There are other simple tonal mismatches. Kazuya and Mommy reflecting on their dating history has a high upbeat electronic track that makes me think of zany hijinks and not of an intentional ploy to get Kazuya thinking of the nostalgic good times as is Mommy's intention. But the worst of these scenes all seem to happen in episode 4, the first one being Kazuya and Kibei's fight. The music, in my opinion, is energetic in a weird way. It's not that fights can't have music like this, because of course they can, but it reads to me like someone is having fun fighting. It gives a lot of levity to what I would argue is a sudden and serious conflict. Part of that is because the character reactions suggest that this is a big deal, but the music undercuts that as though these characters often have physical arguments. If there was a desire to keep the music in line with the later section, where they throw verbal insults at each other, admittedly, on the comedic side there, they should have moved the dialogue at the start, since it's arguably the most important thing said in this whole conversation. That concept is important for this early part of the story, even if it's coming from a place of misunderstanding, and I feel like the levity of the soundtrack missed the opportunity to hammer that point home. Credit to the show for having proper tone in the other parts of this scene. The music where Kibe calls out mommy has that seriousness I was looking for in this initial part. But first impressions are important, and I can't help but feel like Rental Girlfriend missed the mark here. That serious track throughout would have gone a long way to resolving the tonal problem at the beginning. And it is this confusion over tone setting that makes me confused about some of the scenes later in this episode. Later on the boat, for example, Mizuhara is feeling ill and Kazuya comes in to try and cheer her up.
もう大学でも話しかけない。アパートのゴミ捨ての時間とかできるだけずらすよ。もう借りないから。水原千鶴は。
So, does this music sound familiar? It should. It was Mommy's drinking music earlier. And normally I'd be willing to give Rental Girlfriend some credit and be like, hell yeah, they're connecting this discussion to Mommy's earlier victory in episode 2. Sure, there's nothing about her in the text here. He's saying he's done renting Mizuhara and how he'd love to give her 10 stars. But subtextually, that's because he'll be pursuing Mommy full on again. But I think this track choice misses the mark for me because it's not speaking to the dominant emotion of the characters on screen. Mommy gets her moment after this scene, and notably the music stops for when Kazuya's phone rings with a call from her. That would seem to be the opposite of what should happen if this music was for Mommy. Mizuhara is feeling ill. Kazuya is self-satisfied but not combative, so why this track? His only sin here is an inability to read the room. At best, this track is an ironic pick for Mizuhara's state of mind. Here's Kazuya totally missing the point, and the music achieves that right alongside him. If that was genuinely the intent, this anime is playing 8-dimensional chess, but the more likely answer to me is that this is supposed to match Kazuya's dialogue unironically. He's affirming a decision here after all, and we should be happy about his conclusion, apparently represented by the same music that suggested that Mommy was trying to pick a fight and embarrass Kazuya earlier. But really, I can't say that it's clever definitively, because I strongly doubt that it's for Mizuhara irony when the following scene doesn't really consider her in its track usage. That moment would be the final beat of this episode, where Mizuhara falls from the boat and Kazuya leaps to save her. Quick tangent. Normally when an episode ends on something serious, but the traditional fade into the ED music overlaps for an emotional contrast, I don't really consider that a flaw. For example, Log Horizon's first episode ends with the druid girl running away scared, and meanwhile one of the bubbliest poppy EDs I can think of starts to play in the background. It's a total tonal contrast that wouldn't work if it wasn't the ED music, meaning that we'll get another episode to pick up on that thread next time. In the ending minutes of episode 4 of Rental Girlfriend, this scene is independent of the ED, so I don't think such an explanation works here. I can't run the whole clip because of copyright, but based on this bit, judge for yourself. So, I love the phone crashing. That's great sound design and clearly draws distinction between Mommy and Mizuhara in regard to priority for Kazuya. I like how it builds to its drop in both visual and audio terms with Kazuya jumping, and I think that the show totally sells that this is a freeing and heroic moment for him. To all of that, I think the positive tune works well, and I believe that those were the intentions behind this decision. But I think the earlier moments after Mizuhara falls into the water and all of the uncertainty and danger involved in that are undercut by this music choice. Mizuhara's role in the scene is ignored by the audio outside of how Kazuya is responding, and that's weird since she's the female lead. There's barely even a second to process that she's in danger before the audio tells us that she's gonna be fine. I think this is doubly bad because the visuals suggest that this is very concerning. I mean, just look at it. That's now no longer in harmony. I also find that the quick assertion of the jump track creates zero anticipation in the audio, which helps to wreck the pacing in this scene because the slow-mo is just so goofy, which makes all the build up to Kazuya's leap significantly less impressive. From the moment Mizuhara falls and the music begins, we know what's going to happen, so why is Kazuya's phone dropping building in even more time? Basically, I am constantly swapping between the opinion that this music choice is good because of how it's Kazuya taking control of the music in a positive way for the second time in this series, notably asserting his own decision-making when Mami has really been the dominant auditory force in the show, and then that this music choice is awful because it lessens the dramatic nature of the scene and in doing so lowers the female lead's importance as a character. I would have been ecstatic if there had been no music from her fall to the moment Kazuya hears, followed by bringing in the music, because then we achieve both aspects, where the audience can legitimately worry about Mizuhara and what Kazuya's reaction is going to be, and then with the track coming in, highlight this clear shift in priority from Mami to Mizuhara as previewed in episode 3 and earlier with Kibe. I don't like the actual track itself, regardless of those things, but at least it would have improved the scene's slow-mo usage. God, it really just bothers me. Before we wrap this up, I want to give some quick thoughts about other aspects of the show, like, did you notice that there's the cliche slam of low notes on a piano when Mami appears on the screen here in the OP? That's awesome. What's less awesome is when you notice that these scratches appear in the corner of what feels like every fifth shot, and they're always exactly the same. What I'm looking forward to, now that the initial chapters are done being adapted and the conflict between Mizuhara and Mami is likely on hold into the season finale, is how on earth they're gonna trim stuff to introduce Sumi this season. It's gonna be such a sprint, and I'm ecstatic to see how the development curves are either smoothed out or completely run roughshod. Honestly, the show has met all of my predictions for the adaptation so far, which, well, my Discord can tell you about my feelings on this manga. Let me know your thoughts on the second instance of Mami's boxing music and whether you think it's brilliant for cueing in Mami victory / ironic Mizuhara resonance, or if it's boneheaded because it completely misses the tone of the scene. I'm genuinely curious about where the majority of viewers fall on it, and hopefully next time Rental Girlfriend does something awesome or awful with its soundtrack, you'll be right there alongside me, absolutely baffled. Thanks for watching.